Welcome everyone to another episode of The Caring Instinct. We're excited to have Debi Gliori with us. She is the award-winning writer and illustrator of over 80 picture books and novels for children of all ages, including the best-selling modern classic No Matter What and the Mr. Bear series. Her picture book about depression, Night Shift, was shortlisted for the Kate Greenway Medal. She is also author of the Little Owl series of books, illustrated by Alison Brown for Bloomsbury. Debi lives near Edinburgh and has twice been writer-in-residence in the Shetland Isles. Her favourite colour is blue, or more precisely, 4 different shades of blue. Cerulean blue, is that right?
Yep.
Cobalt blue, Mediterranean turquoise blue, and warm ultramarine blue. She has sold over 600,000 books in the UK alone. How's that for an intro?
That's good. That's good.
I've got actually a request from my 7-year-old son, because he asked me to say that his favorite book is actually not the picture books. Now, not anymore. Now that he's so old, it's the
so grown up.
Yes, it's the Pure Death series, and his favorite character is Damp.
Oh.
Because he's got a little brother who is the same age as Damp, so
okay.
It's really alive for us.
Oh, I bet, in so many different ways.
This age and this spirit of adventure.
So do you read them to him?
My husband actually reads them together with my son, and I listen in, or they read it at bedtime, and then I put the one who is the same age as Damp to bed, and then in the morning they tell me what happened in the chapters that they read at night.
Oh, lovely! Oh, good. Oh, what fun! I must reread them, because I haven't actually. I mean, despite having written them over the course of 7 years, I have actually managed to forget quite a lot of what went on in them. So, if I return to them, it will be really interesting, because I'll be returning to them as a reader rather than a writer, and that'd be much more fun. Because when you sort of review your own stuff as a writer, all you can see are the bad bits, so, which is a bit of a shame. So I'd love to read them and sort of see what they're actually like to be as books, as opposed to works in progress.
I had
a lot of fun doing those books. I really enjoyed them.
They're so fun. And Tarantella's now my explanation for all things going wrong with the internet, like that lost email.
Yes.
Joe, it's a spider that gets into the web, the World Wide Web, and does its devious work there. And
I call it. There's a nanny in the books called Flora McLachlan, as you know, and she is my go-to character, especially in the weirdest of times. Like if I'm, I used to do quite a lot of hill walking, but I'm a really inadequate and woos-like hill walker. I'm terrified of heights. So if I got to a bit on the hill where there was a bit of exposure and you might fall and kill yourself, it was extraordinary. This voice would come in my head and it would go, "Now, dear, just put 1 foot there on that wee bit." And it was in this sort of cod Edinburgh sort of Highland accent. I thought, it's Flora McLachlan in my head. It was amazing. So I was nannied up and down hills.
Anyway. we so need her in our lives. My husband and I said, we need Nanny McLachlan in our lives. With your caring and your magic, and
I'd
cooking the chips just the right way.
Yeah.
Okay. Debi, could you tell us about little Debi, please?
I carry her with
First
me.
question.
From oh Lord, I was thinking about that this morning, because I did imagine that you would probably sort of want to know, sort of where all of this stuff came from. So little Debi, as far back as I can remember, only child. sort of elderly parents who did not get on particularly well together. So it was like being parachuted into a war zone. I know that sounds really extreme, but truly it was, because as a child you've got no idea what on earth is going on. And if the family that you arrive in is dysfunctional, you just take that as normal. This is, how things are. So I have a real ragbag of some rather unpleasant memories that I'm not desperately keen to go sort of rummaging around in. But I think all of what was going on around me just made me into this quite dreamy, slightly absent child, because I have noticed now as an adult that my coping strategy really, when things go a bit pear-shaped, is just to disappear. And so I think I probably did that as a child. And what I disappeared into was mainly books, because for my parents, sort of many faults, they had many, many good points as well. And one of which was they supplied me with an absolute ton of sort of reading material. And so one of my earliest memories was my parents were quite devoutly religious, surprise, surprise, and off they would go to church on a Sunday morning, and they would leave me, because you could do that kind of thing back then. Nowadays, I mean, that kind of makes me just go, what? You left a child alone in the house? But anyway, they did. They left me in my cot. I couldn't climb out the cot because I was too little, so I must have been under 2, and they just put a gigantic pile of books on the end, inside the cot at the foot of the bed, and I'd work my way through them, and of course I couldn't read a single word, so I would tell myself stories based on the pictures in the books and based on the stories that I had been told. So I was sort of reliving the books from memory, and I think that was the best training you could possibly imagine for an illustrator and a writer, to be just forced into the company of books rather than anything else, and to have to make up stories based on the pictures. And it meant I was quite visually literate from quite early on. And I can remember so clearly the absolute frustration I felt, because I would draw and write all the time. That was my just sort of default response to boredom, sort of writing stories. And I remember it just used to drive me nuts that what the pictures I saw in my head were most definitely not what was coming out, at the end of my pencil. All of the drawings I was doing as a child, I hated them because they were so crap. I was like, oh, that doesn't look like what I'm seeing. So I actually anticipated your question, and I have my first book.
Yeah, oh really?
So this is the kind of stuff I was doing. I mean, the writing is... I have sat and tried to understand what on earth I was on about. And, like, these kind of pictures, look at the hands. I had such difficulty drawing hands. Still do. Find drawing hands an absolute pain in the bum.
How old were you when you did that one?
When I did that, well...
Do you know?
I've written my name and address on the front cover, and it's an English address, so I can remember exactly when that was, and I was 5.
5.
Started school at 4 for some obscure reason. I think I just squeaked into that year's intake. So I was utterly mystified by school. I was far too young to be there. And in primary 2, when I was 5, my parents split up for the first time, and I had no idea that this was going to happen. But my mum sort of said to me in the morning when I was going off to school, she said, say goodbye to the house. You're not going to ever see it again. I was like, what? And she said, it's okay, I'll pick you up at lunchtime at school. We're going on an adventure. And that adventure was taking an overnight train down to London, where my mum had a new job set up, and I was suddenly transported out of school in Scotland, in Glasgow, to school in Pinner in Reading. And I mean, I didn't know which way was up. So that whole book was written. That whole little sort of jotter full of... I don't know why I always drew women like that, these enormous... I suppose that's what adult women looked like to me. They were colossal. So that book was written during that period. And I was quite solitary. I didn't fit in. I just never quite got the social cues that other kids seem to understand innately. And I didn't have brothers and sisters to kind of knock me into shape, which is such a shame, because watching my own family with 5 children and watching how siblings interact, I just think, oh God, that must have... I mean, it can be ghastly and brutal, but it also is what makes us human. And to not actually have that, to be an only child, I think was really quite hard, especially an only child with parents going through their own version of World War 2.5.3 version 6 or whatever. So yeah, I did struggle as a littlie. I really did. And I continued struggling. And I was sort of academically, I think because I had nothing else better to do than to be good and to work very hard, I was academically quite bright, so great things were expected of me. And my parents by then had separated, so it was a sort of point of pride for my mum, because I lived with my mum. It was a point of pride for her that I was doing well at school. And when I hit puberty, unsurprisingly, it all began to come apart. And I just made a real bollocks of everything. And it was almost like I was sort of on a track for self-destruction. So I did everything possible to make my life as difficult as I possibly could. So I ran away from home several times. I had a boyfriend who was twice my age. At 15, he was just absolutely disgusting. I mean, I kind of look back and I think, what on earth was going on? Why did I do that? And very soon, the sort of relationship that I had with both parents was non-existent. And my mum would resort to locking me in the house. She would, I mean, which is also quite terrifying. I look back on that and think, dear God, how unbelievably unsafe was that? She would go out to work and lock me in a 3rd floor flat with no means of escape other than the front door that I couldn't get through, which was not clever. And she also took the phone away. She unplugged it from the wall and took it to work with her, so that I had no means of contacting the outside world. I couldn't have banged on the windows if the house was on fire, because they were double glazed. Nobody would have heard me. So it's all just like, oh no, this is not what you do if you're a rational adult in charge of a wayward teenager. So of course I ran away from home very effectively, finally, and never went back. And very soon after that discovered I was pregnant with my first child, and at which point I kind of grew some sense, because I kind of had to. If I didn't care about myself, because I plainly didn't, I certainly cared about him, and I wanted to make his life the absolute opposite to the life that I'd had. So I think that was kind of like a real big turning point. And at that point I decided, right, I need to get a job so I can support us both, because his father had sort of faded out of the picture completely. So his father was the bloke who was twice as old as me. He was 31 to my 15, which is, I mean, there's a word for that and it's not pleasant. But anyway, so I was in sole charge of this little boy, and I just decided the only thing that I ever wanted to do was draw pictures. So it was quite logical, go to art college, learn how to do it professionally, and hopefully get a job at the end of it, which is so naive. I mean, most people come out of art college and it's very difficult to find employment as an artist, as you can imagine. But somehow I've managed to do it. And it's really been relatively straightforward, with obviously several bumps along the way and a lot of failed relationships, or relationships that just didn't work out. But finally, in my dotage, I've sort of reached a really lovely space where everything is fairly settled, and I have a really delightful family who I love to bits, and my books are out there, and I get to do I get to do the job I love every single day. So actually it worked out, but there were various points en route where it plainly wasn't. And like when I left art school, I had a complete breakdown. It was almost like a sort of a reaction to everything that had happened. I'd sort of parked all of the stuff, the fact that I had, temporarily been, well, I'd left home with a guy for whom the only word I can describe is an abuser. And he was quite a sort of Svengali kind of character. So I was too young and idiotic to realise that I was in the hands of someone who was actually quite frankly dangerous. And I think none of that really hit me until I'd managed to get all the way through art college and do a postgrad and do reasonably well there and get myself established as a freelance illustrator. And I was in a sort of nice relationship with a lovely guy, and my son was happy at school and everything was great. At which point I just lost the plot completely and became very, very ill, couldn't work for about a year. And that was the first sort of bout of depression I'd ever had. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd know there wasn't the societal conversation that we have now about depression. Back then it was really quite shameful. Nobody I knew had ever had it. And it was just, I did really think I was going completely mad, and I thought I would be locked up in an asylum, and I thought I'd never see my little boy again. And apart from all of that, I couldn't cope with the contents of my own head. So I think it was just all of the stuff from the past bubbling up in a oneer, and I didn't have the tools, the mental tools to deal with it. So, I mean, I suppose that eventually, many, many years afterwards, turned into a book. That's the glorious thing about being as a writer and an illustrator, is that you take the fabric of your life and you weave it into what you do as the art that you practice. So that was an incredibly long answer.
Yeah. And that book is the night
shift,
right?
Night Shift, yes.
Yeah.
You've survived.
I survived, yeah. It is survivable. It's not curable, but you can certainly survive with it. You can accommodate it. And yeah.
Yeah.
And it was helpful for me to write that book, but it appears to have been really helpful for other people, judging by the sort of the mail and the comments on various social media platforms that I get, which is lovely because it sort of validates the fact that I'm not just sitting around all day plucking dust out my navel and painting pretty pictures. I'm actually doing something that has some use to other people, which, there's nothing wrong with sitting around all day picking dust out your navel and making beautiful pictures. That's a very joyous pursuit, but it is quite helpful sometimes just to feel that some of it has some use in the world that we're currently living in, which is quite an interesting place. I think you'd agree.
I get the sense from the comments as well that the parents find that book just as useful as maybe the children do. Does that come across in the comments?
Yeah, it was never meant to be a children's book, but because and I mean the publishers didn't market it as a children's book. Hotkey, a lot of the books they do are for young adults, and sort of for adults as well. And it was really the booksellers that went, "Oh, Debi Gliori, yeah, we know where her books
That must be
go."
for children.
And they just bunged it straight in the children's section, which is not helpful. It should really, I think it should be under self-help. But I'm not a bookseller. I can't go around every bookshop in the UK saying, "Excuse me, you find that in the wrong place.
Shelf.
Let me just rearrange your stock." So, anyway.
How do you feel about? How do you feel about children reading that? Well, I'll give you the example. My children read it this morning, and they're 5 and 2, and they loved it.
Oh, I was conscious when I was doing it that I couldn't make it too sort of gruesome or terrifying or sort of in any way anything that would give children nightmares, because that's absolutely not my job. And of course I did know it would undoubtedly be sort of read by children as well as adults. But it was almost like when I did the book, I was having yet another episode of sort of really quite bad depression, and it was a way to get a signal out. It was the only way I could get a signal out, other than, like your family who know you and love you well enough to, sort of read the signs, and they know that you're, oh dear, here we go again. She's about to, sort of go into another episode of depression, sort of batten down the hatches. And they would say, how do you feel? And of course, I didn't have the words, but I did have the pictures. So it started as illustrations. I had to communicate in some way what I was feeling, so I started just sort of drawing the pictures, and I drew so many of them. And my literary agent in London had emailed and said, "What are you working on at the moment?" And I said, "Oh God, I'm actually drawing." I said, "I'm drawing a dragon lying on her back with her vulva exposed." And she said, "What?" I said, "No, really, I am." I said, "Don't ask me why." It's just, artists, what can you say? They do weird things. So I showed her the picture, and she said, "Oh my God, have you got any more of those?" And I said, "Yeah." And so I sent her everything I'd been doing, and she said, "Could you string those together in a sort of narrative form?" Because she said, "Those are so powerful." And she said, "I think they are a book." It hadn't even occurred to me. I mean, you would think I'd know by now, but I had not ever thought. They were quite personal, sort of illustrations, really just for myself, so that I had this feeling that despite the fact I was in this horrible black hole of depression, I could actually get the signal out from the abyss to say, "I'm still in here, but this is what it feels like." And the drawing in question got edited because my partner came into the studio and he said, "Don't really think you can put that in a book." And I said, "But it's a dragon, come on, it's fine. Dragons are allowed to be naked, and if they want to lie there with their legs akimbo, it's absolutely fine, it doesn't look, horrific." And he said, "Yeah, but it's just possibly a hurdle too far for, a publisher to get through." So we did a bit of editing. But it's a drawing that absolutely summed up just that feeling of, it's sort of helplessness when you are actually in the thick of a full-blown depressive period, before you actually bottom out and come back up out the other side. There is just that feeling eventually of, I can't actually do anything about this. I've tried everything I know to alleviate how I feel. All I can actually do is submit and just lie here and wait for it to pass. And the dragon is not actually attacking the person in the picture. The dragon is asleep, because it's just this gigantic, powerful sort of metaphor for depression. So it's just holding this little figure. And the little figure isn't struggling. She's just lying there in her PJs, kind of looking at it. Do you want to see the picture? I can grab it. It would take 2 minutes while I just go and, just so you know what I'm whistling on.
Yeah.
One second, it's on the shelf.
No worries.
Here we go. And it's worth noting that, when you pick up a picture book as a reader, what you're seeing, I always say this to children if I'm in schools, what you're seeing in the pictures in the book is actually the tip of the iceberg. There's all of this stuff underneath that you will never get to see unless I go into your school and do a school visit and show you all the preparatory sketches and the influences and the snippets of things out of, Sunday supplements, and just sort of everything that goes into what actually makes the book happen. So, of course, for Night Shift, there was a whole life But that's the heavily edited Oops Dragon. You can see that we cut her off at the waist. You don't get to see the bits. But she is holding that little figure.
Yeah.
And there's all these sort of feathers and broken eggs around her. And I didn't question why I'd made that picture like that. I just drew it. It was sort of drawn straight from, I think, the pit of my stomach, really, without any filters in place. And, you know, like the books, the hardback version of the book's absolutely tiny. The drawings are the same height as I am. They're enormous. And so that's another thing you don't see in the book. And it was quite hard having them in the studio, because occasionally I'd have to break off from doing these enormous big, you know, sort of dragging my soul out and putting out in paper type pictures, and then go back to my drawing board and draw fluffy bunnies. You know?
Yeah.
Sort of, you know, sort of things from, you know, a sort of nursery. So the contrast between the two things was quite peculiar. It really was. Anyway, so that's, sort of part of the, I suppose, the origin story for that.
And yet, it's great. And I know there's an interview I was watching, and you mentioned depression as a process. And I love how you go toward in these books, and in no matter what, you really go towards the feeling, and not so much the emotion. And it's like especially in children, the emotion can really just stay there, and they can be full of anger, full of sadness, full of things. But what tends to go, you notice, is the feeling, and they lose connection to the feeling. So
yes,
it's just great to be able to see that kind of being danced or led back towards that feeling. One of the comments that comes up is Small says, I think he says, "I'm feeling grim and dark." You can imagine that in another book might be, "I'm feeling angry and annoyed," but going towards that feeling just really gives it that depth for me I think that's great.
Yeah, interestingly, no matter what came not out of a period of depression, but also a really, really difficult period when I had separated prior to divorcing, or being divorced by, or, you know, we got divorced, my last husband. And it was a really sort of horrible, like we didn't, what's it called, consciously uncouple. We fought like cat and dog, and we, you know, sort of said, "I'll see you in court," and we spent a fortune on lawyers, and it was all just messy. And the children, we tried to not fight in front of the children, but the atmosphere in the house was absolutely and totally poisonous. And when I did finally leave, and we worked out a sort of horrible child sharing routine whereby they would spend half their time with their dad and half their time with me, and when they weren't with me, I was absolutely miserable without them. And my youngest, at the time, my youngest daughter she was tiny. She was 18 months old, and she did not understand what was going on at all. And watching her, or watching both the children, because my first son, who sort of more or less went through art college with me when he was very little, he was grown up by then. This was like a sort of second family, and they were quite young. So my two children of that second family, who were caught up in the divorce, were just having an absolutely horrible time. And watching them go through that, and having been a child of divorce myself, I was pretty devastated by it, and I wasn't feeling like I was the nicest human being. I blamed myself totally for putting them through it. It was the kind of thing that I just did not ever want to ever do to my own children, and here I was doing it, and it was just horrible. And so when my little daughter, at 18 months old, was with us, she would act out all of her feelings of confusion and rage and, you know, upset, and just wanting everything to go back to how it was. but she didn't really have the language for doing it. And she, I think, felt absolutely safe when she was with me, safe enough to be able to attack me and say dreadful things, safe in the knowledge that I wasn't going to go, well, the hell with you, be gone, child. So one day she packed up all of her little Sylvanian family, sort of rabbits and hedgehogs and stuff, in a rucksack, and she said, I hate you, I'm going to go and stay with Daddy forever, I never want to see you again. And I was sort of trying not to just cry my eyes out and say, oh, I wish you wouldn't say that, that's really hurtful. And I was just sort of saying, well, it's all right, you don't have to do that, and just sort of gently, you know, try and talk her down off the ceiling. And when she finally that day did head off to her dad's, because it was time for her to go back to her dad's, and she would always get desperately upset before she had to go back, or when she came to me, it was the changeover periods, which were very, very understandably very difficult for her. So when she'd finally gone, I was in bits, and I thought, I'll just go to work, because, you know, what else am I going to do? I'm just going to stare at the wall. And I went to my studio, and I sat there, and I felt so dreadful for her. You know, I knew how badly she was hurting, and I was hurting too. And I wrote No Matter What in 20 minutes flat. I'd no idea that I was going to do it. I hadn't planned it. It appeared in my head, and I just wrote it down. And at the end of it, I put my head in my drawing board, and I just howled. I couldn't stop crying, because I realised what I'd written was what I wanted to hear. For me, it's what I wanted to say to her. It's like the promise we make our children. And I felt I'd really broken that promise to her. And I think no matter what, you know, like the promise, I'll always love you and keep you safe. I couldn't keep her safe. I was handing her over to her dad, who, I mean, she was safe with her dad, but I'd chosen not to be with him because I didn't feel particularly safe with him. And it was all just absolutely toxic, but the book was just like, oh my God, that's exactly what I wanted to say. And I've never done that before, and I've never been able to do it since. It was just like, it was the most extraordinary moment of just sort of pure inspiration from I know not where. And it really did blow me apart. And I knew when I'd written something really special.
Do you know what? And I'm sure Olga's got lost, but I just have one thing as well. But what I love about hearing that is many parents what you notice now is that the answer is always, you know, okay, I'll go and get help. There'll be an expert I can call on, or I'll read a parenting book, you know, how to cope with divorce, these kind of things. But you found that you went really in, the answer was within you, and you found it, and you gave it, and it just, and that's, you can't beat that.
No.
It's the best place to go. And we'd love to empower parents to go on those journeys as well themselves and become the answer to their children in that way. So it's just great to hear that stories like that.
Well, thank you.
I'll just show this is the book we're talking about, that I truly believe needs to be in every home, with a child, or as Debbie's just said, for yourself.
Yes.
This is the if this is the parent you needed and maybe didn't always have.
But we can parent ourselves. We can kind of, you know, take that child that we once were and say, it's cool, I've got you, you're safe, I know you better than anyone else in the world, so, you know, stick with me, I've got your back, I think. So, I mean, no matter what has, it's, I think, what they call in publishing an evergreen, so it just keeps on being out there, which, you know, of course, I am very thankful for. As you
Keeps
can
on
imagine,
giving.
it keeps the wolf from the door, despite being about foxes. And the publishers, of course, have really, ever since I first did it, said, are you going to write another one? And I've said, no, I don't want to write another one. I think one is quite enough in this world.
No matter what you...
Yeah, but having said that, then came the pandemic, and I started to realise that actually possibly what we need is a no matter what for us as adults, which is also a no matter what for children. It's hard to describe this, but I think there was just kind of this wave of fear and shock went rolling out across the planet when we realised that here was something we couldn't do a damn thing about, which was quite possibly going to kill us stone dead, and had visibly brought everything that we took so utterly for granted to a grinding, juddering halt. And there were those amazing sort of couple of months where in the UK the weather was absolutely exquisite, and there were no planes in the sky, and there were no cars on the roads, and everything was utterly still but also utterly threatening. It was like we became frightened of each other. And I remember just sort of thinking, but we so need each other. The sort of enforced isolation of lockdown, where you would see people and you would shy away from them in case they were, sort of carrying the virus. It was just the most bizarre thing. So in the middle of that, I think because it was just so quiet and there was no there were far fewer distractions, I started to write a sort of, it's not a follow-up to No Matter What. It's basically what I needed to hear. I needed to hear it was going to be all right. I mean, I knew on some level that it would be all right no matter what happened. What's the worst that could happen? Well, the worst that could happen is, I would die, my children would die, everybody would die. And I think having sort of come to terms with that, if you can ever come to terms with that, I think because it was happening to us all, because it was happening across the globe, made it kind of easier to go, oh, well, almost be really fatalistic and say, well, if it happens, it happens. It's out of my hands. I've done everything within my small human powers to avoid this happening. But if it happens, well, that's it. So there was that sort of fatalistic sense of, yes, everything will be all right. And really, there's very, very little you can actually do to affect the outcome of what happens next. And so I started to write a version. It's not a version of No Matter What, but it is most definitely. It's still large and small together. And yeah, well, there was Stormy Weather, I know, I do love that. I wrote Stormy Weather though in response to. Hang on, where's the book? Not in response to No Matter What. I wrote Stormy Weather in response to The Trouble with Dragons.
Trouble with Dragons.
Which is a fairly uncompromising, it's not bleak, but it's a fairly uncompromising look at climate change for children.
It's honest.
It's pretty honest. And because of that, I did worry that maybe that was too strong a message to be giving to small children. Now, this book came out 14 years ago, and I was interviewed when it came out by some newspaper journalist. I can't remember what it was. I can't remember who it was. But they said, "What do you hope to achieve by writing a book about climate change for children?" And do you know what I said? I said, I want small children to go and march on number 10 and say, we don't want this. We want you to change our ways, because at the time, I just thought there's absolutely no point speaking to adults because they're not listening. They're stopping up their ears and pressing their feet to the floor on their accelerators and just going hell for leather, as if, you know, we have 10 planets to work our way through. But I said, children will listen. They're going to inherit the mess. And I hope they'll march on Downing Street. And lo and behold, it came to pass.
The junior strikes.
Yes.
Yeah.
The school strikes for climate. The wondrous Greta. And all of those children going, excuse me, this is our world. And you are making such a mess of it. And I was just like, okay, right. But at the time, because I thought, I really don't want to give children nightmares, that's why I wrote Stormy Weather as a lullaby for climate change times, because it is full of storms and floods and, you know, awful weather. And it's basically saying, don't worry, you know, I'll look after you. I've got your back, which is all that we can say as parents.
Yeah.
But sometimes as parents, we need to remember that we've been saying that, meaning it with our whole hearts. We've been saying it, believing it's true to our children, and we've forgotten it for ourselves. On some level, we're going, I don't believe it's going to be all right. So we actually need to hear it echoed back, which is where this, the follow-up to No Matter What, will take us. And I've got a great title, fabulous title. It's going to be called Come What May.
It's a new book. It's not.
It's a new book.
Out.
I'm halfway through writing it. So
sorry, I thought you.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's going to be. It's going to be
Come
a
what
while
may.
before you see it. We'll all be a great deal older, but it's on.
We
its
can
way.
wait. Come what
It
may.
can wait. Yeah.
I've got a question about No Matter What. It works so well for toddlers and for like slightly older children. It gave my son and myself the language.
Yeah.
And especially that picture was small with a bucket on his head when he's feeling grim and dark. This is what we've just been saying. Tommy, are you feeling grim and dark? Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And
we all feel that, though, don't we?
Oh, we all feel that. We all feel that. And as Joe said, this is more powerful probably than saying, oh, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling grim and dark. And and I was thinking about this age when especially teenagers or young adults, when we kind of start to stretch out the cookie cutter with which we grew up, when we are loved as a certain person, and suddenly we go, do you know what? I'll be the completely opposite to see whether you're still there, no matter what. So, oh, my parents are vegan. I'll go eat steak for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You know, my parents are Democrat. I'll be a Republican. I'll be whatever it is, whatever is at the core, like whatever is the highest value, religion, politics. They young people might be tempted, might be driven. It's not even a decision. It's this really strong drive to try the opposite and see if you're still there.
Yes. It's, will you still love me? I mean, do you really love me, or do you love my packaging? Sort of. Yeah.
And that's such a great level to see it at, I think, because generally, I think people will see it as, okay, this is time for teaching or education. You know, we can show you that, you know, veganism is the way forward, or you should be eating steak, or you can get really lost down that. This is the way to be. This is not, and you can go there for a long time. Whereas if you see that as looking for that invitation for the no matter what, or looking for that to be there, your response might be so different as a parent.
Yes. It's, I love you, really, you know, I mean, that is what love is, though, isn't it? It's, you know, I love you no matter what you become, or no matter who you become, or no matter what you think or believe or do. It's such a huge thing to promise a child, and it's easy when a child is a little helpless, adorable person. It's less easy when they become a teenager, and it can become almost impossible when they're an adult and they're voicing opinions and beliefs that you just think, these are so different to mine. But, you know, there's sort of ways of finding your way through that as well. But it's just, honestly, the whole sort of journey of being a parent it's not just the child growing up, it's the parent growing up as well. They teach us every bit as much as we teach them. It is at best, when it's all working really well, it is totally a two-way process. We learn side by side. So,
and I often think children have access to those feelings from the, right from the beginning. That's all they've got. So it's just there. And what can happen is they become disconnected from it as they grow up. But as adults, we're probably more likely to be disconnected. So it's just it's a way of. Well, I know to being a parent, it's a way of really coming back to those and really seeing them. Wow, and you really see them. Like if you think of the toddler years, start with the tantrum, you just see them come and move and in their purity, and when it's okay for you and it's not hard, it's really a beautiful thing in a way. It sounds weird to say, but you can just really see it.
It's like watching sort of summer storms move through. You can see it. It's like, whoa, here we go. Yep, it's coming, and it breaks over you, and then it goes away, and everything is all rain washed, and the sun comes back out. And it can happen in the space of 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. No wonder you need an afternoon nap.
And that's it. Those words you use, the moving through, is so because a lot of children don't get that move through. It almost gets arrested.
It's stuck.
Potentially, we need to teach you now, or we might treat it with separation, time out chair or something like this. And it's just too overwhelming to feel then. If we can give them space to really go through and have that storm move through them, and you can find that nap afterwards, it's so healthy. Yes.
Yeah. But also, we have to be wary of it. That's a counsel of perfection. There are times where we are, as adults, operating with our heads inside that metal pail because it's all just too much for us too. So it's true. I think it's also very important to acknowledge your mistakes with your children, which I think is probably where, again, to go back to no matter what, when small asks, oh Lord, does love wear out? Does it break or bend?
Yeah.
Can you fix it, stick it, does it mend? And the answer in the UK edition was, Large said, oh help, said Large, I'm not that clever. I just know I'll love you forever. The American editors did not like that. The American editors said, no, parents shouldn't admit that they don't know what they're doing. And I was like, oh my God, that's so different. So there were a couple of changes in the American edition. Let me just grab it, because they changed that response, and they also changed the response where, like, the big question that Small asks at the end, but what happens when we're dead and gone? The American editor said, no, we can't have that. So let me get my American.
I saw that book and I was like, what's going on?
Where's it
the
gone?
American edition you saw?
Yes.
So
I'm pretty sure I've got the English one.
Well, The English one, there's also I get loads of outraged emails from parents saying,
Really?
I bought the board book and it's not right. Do you know the board book has got a different ending as well?
That's right. That's the one I saw, yes.
Yeah, it's not ideal. Oh my goodness, I'd forgotten this one. Wow. This copy, I don't know if you can see all the signatures that all over the title page. There's things written all over it. That copy went out to Iraq and was read by serving US servicemen to their children at night when they were serving in Iraq and they wanted to read a bedtime story to their children. And they knew that they might not actually make it back from the theatre of war. So they read them no matter what at night, which I just find almost unbearably moving that these children.
Oh, we need a Ukrainian translation. Is there Ukrainian?
I don't think so. There's Romanian, but not. I know. It's anyway.
I'll see what I can do. I'm Ukrainian. I'll see.
Are you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Oh, that must be. It's a
We need that.
hard time. Okay, so the Americans had, but what about when you're far away? Does your love go or does it stay? And we had, what happens when we're dead and gone?
Yes.
Will you love me
The
then? Does
ultimate
love go
far
on?
away.
But the yeah, okay. This one where in the UK edition the mum says, "Oh help," said Large. "I'm not that clever. I just know I'll love you forever." In the American one they say, "With time together, a smile and a kiss, love can be mended with things like this," which I just, I didn't write it. There are times where you just have to say to your editor, well, you know best for your territory, but it wouldn't be my first choice of words. So, but I do get American parents getting in touch and saying, I've just read this terrible version of your book and it says, what happens when you're dead and gone? Who wrote that? And I'm like, that's the proper version you've got. I never hear from them ever again. Each to their own. So it's different territories have different needs.
Definitely.
Yeah, we do. I was just thinking we actually do have there is a Russian translation of No Matter What, which for some Ukrainians, I guess, because they are bilingual, aren't they?
Yes, yes, we are. Well, we need to look into that.
Yeah.
That would be a wonderful practice. If fathers that are away could read it in the same way as you've described.
Well, over to you. It would be lovely. I would just, that kind of, it's just kind of like hands across the world. It's ways of getting a message out that actually is quite an important one, that no matter what is going on in the wider horrible world, there is this constancy of love that is more important.
And a book can do so much where it might be too vulnerable to just say it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons I used foxes rather than humans, because you can say things in children's books using animals. You can say really big, important, quite sort of, deal with quite scary concepts, and it's okay because it's animals that this is happening to. So it's enough of a remove so that a child doesn't think, oh my goodness, that's me, or that could be me. I mean, they know on some level, yes, that could be me, but there is that necessary distance because it's happening to an animal, so you can go, okay, that's not happening to me.
Yeah, there's that thing again of making it, it's a safe way of feeling, making it a safe way to feel. Yeah.
want to ask about this one.
Oh, yeah.
Little Owl's first day. So preparing for the interview, we've got a lot of your books, and we borrowed more from the library. And my 7-year-old found this book and read it, and he brought it to me and said, "Mummy, you've got to read this, because this is exactly how I felt."
Oh.
And this was so important for him. He's because I was busy, and he was, "Mom, but you have to read it," and it was for him. So his first days at the nursery and school, well, interrupted by the pandemic, but they're like 3-4 years ago now, and it was still the book helped him get in touch with that.
Oh, wow.
And why this works so well is because it's so honest.
Yes.
Because it would be tempting to go, just for our listeners, a quick, so Little Owl is going to have the first day at school, and Mummy says, "Oh, you must be excited for your big day." But Little Owl says, "No, I don't like big days. I want a small day. I want to stay at home with you and Baby Owl." And the teacher is trying to sort of build up Little Owl. "Oh, we'll do this exciting thing, and this exciting thing. We'll build a rocket." And all Little Owl wants to do is stay at home with Mummy Owl and Baby Owl.
Yes.
Which is how it is. But it's so tempting for us adults to say, "Oh, this is going to be so much fun." No, this is not. Of course you're going to like it. This is going to be so exciting. It's hard for us to sit there and listen and be there for what's really going on for a child. We want to insert what would be easier for us to hear and what would be...
Yeah. Yes.
So how do you do it? Where do you find this honesty and courage? And do you remember it? Remember how it was for you? Yeah?
Oh God, yes. Don't you? Can't you remember?
Yeah, I do.
So
very much.
I tap into, my complete lack of understanding of what the hell this fresh hell was of going to school.
You said it was.
And why do children need to go to school when they're obviously I know why they need to go to school, so their parents can go to work.
Pretty much.
And theoretically they can learn things that will be useful. But it's so brutal taking a wee child who's only known their own home and the set of rules that's in their own home, and then taking them right out of that, removing everything that is familiar and dropping them into this completely alien place where suddenly there's a whole new set of rules, whole new set of people. Everybody is strange, nothing is familiar, and no wonder they don't want to do it. I mean, I so clearly remember coming home after day one and saying, "Well, that was awful, but thankfully I don't have to do it again." And my mum said, she didn't think, and she said, "Yes, you do. You have to do it until you're at least 18 and you can go to university." And I was like, what? And I didn't go to, I thankfully didn't go to, well, actually, no, maybe nursery would have been good because it slowly gets you into the whole sort of school thing. I went straight into school at 4.5. So all I'm doing when I write is channeling that small girl who I have to say is very close to the surface, really. I haven't lost her. And that might be just because I had spent so much time in my own company and kind of feeding off my own resources, because what was going on around me when I was small was not that great. It wasn't diabolical. I don't want to give the impression that I had an absolutely hideous childhood, but I didn't understand so much of what was going on, and it was only in later life that I realised all that was going on, was that my parents were totally temperamentally unsuited for each other and were about to split up and should really never have had a child. And I don't think my mum really particularly wanted children at all. She had a great career in the Inland Revenue. She was a tax inspector, and I am almost innumerate. I can't add things up. I sit there with a knitting pattern beating my head against the desk because, you have to do a certain amount of maths in order to be able to do these things. I'm like, what? I don't do numbers. So draw your own conclusions from that. But I think a lot of sort of children's writers who seem to get very, very close to the heart of things have a very clear line of communication with their childish self, their childlike selves, because there are, for instance, Quentin Blake, for example, doesn't have children because people assume that if you can write these sort of books that really tap into the realities of childhood, that you must have children. Well, Quentin has no children, but he has an ability, I think, to just contact, to bring up little Quentin up there and sort of say to him, so how did this feel for you? And then turn that into a book.
He said he doesn't like talking to children.
Really?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. He said in one interview. I read that.
That's great. I do feel incredibly awkward around children. Not my own children. Obviously, because, they're so familiar to me and, they are. They are around me all the time. But when I go into schools to talk to children, I feel exactly how I used to feel when I was at school. I feel really awkward and really stupid, and I feel like they're going to gang up on me and just sort of say, you're absolutely crap, get out of our school. And sometimes they sense that. You know how children have this unerring ability to sort of sense blood in the water? Well, they sometimes go, oh, this one's a freak, let's just, and it can be quite difficult. Because when you go in and do a school visit, you're not stepping into the teacher's role, but essentially you're the adult in charge in the room, and you have to hold their attention and, sort of hope that they're going to be interested in what you're saying and drawing and showing them. And sometimes they're patently bored witless, by you. And that's when there's sort of 80 plus of them and only one of you. It's absolutely terrifying. It really is. And it makes me feel 4 years old again. So, yeah, I think that's how it's done. I think we can write about real, authentic children's feelings from that place where we were children ourselves. And I'm really glad that I can still do that and I can still access that small person because, she has been a source of inspiration for all of my life, really. The poor wee scone. Anyway.
My son started using we for little because of pure dead magic.
Has he really?
Really?
Oh, bless. Oh.
Really funny, yes.
There's one of the pure dead magics, or is it just the American ones? Because again, I came up against American editing, and some of it was hilarious because I think there was a scene in which the maid was hanging out the family's washing on the washing line, and she was putting out, now what was it? She was hanging out, loads and loads of black, all of the mum's witchy clothes, and then she was hanging out some, was it some white Y-fronts or something? I can't remember. I think it was white Y-fronts, and the American editor said, "What's a Y-front?" And I had to go into details about why men's underwear was constructed with a Y at the front and upside down. It was really kind of mortifying. One of these email interchanges that you just think, oh, this is ridiculous. And she said, "Oh my God, now what was it they call them? Tidy whiteys." Tidy whiteys. That sounds so uncomfortable. And then I was just like, one of these moments, two countries separated by one language. It was just absolutely, you call them that? How bizarre. So as a response to that, I did a glossary for the back of the Pure Dads for the American market, so it translated all of the Scottish terms, but I was really snarky about it. So you would probably quite enjoy this glossary. It's ridiculous. If at the end you email me your address, I can send you the American edition that's got the glossary at the back of it, because I think your son might rather enjoy it. It's ridiculous.
Oh, that would be lovely. Thank you.
You are welcome.
So I've got a question. So with a lot of books, with a lot of children's books, the first thing you see is the message. It's sort of almost the agenda, I would say. You take the book and you're like, oh, that is a book that teaches emotional literacy, and that is a book that is about how to share, and this is a book that teaches this and this is that. And with your books, even though I can name a theme for a lot of them, like we've mentioned The Trouble with Dragons is a book about climate change, and Wilma the Brave is my favorite book.
I love
it's a feminist book, isn't it?
But it wasn't meant to be. It was meant to be about family, really, and one's place in a family.
That's basically my question. For many books, I can say, oh, this is a book about this, but it never sticks out, the message, and there's never a message in front of the magic or the expense of the magic.
What a nice way of putting it. There's no message in front of the magic. Oh God, that's brilliant. Why aren't you writing books? That is lovely. That's exactly it. It's just so, it must turn children off.
Oh,
when they go,
yes.
Oh, here we go. I'm being told about emotional literacy or being nice to my friends.
I'm being taught, exactly. I'm here to sit and... But how does it... What comes first to you? Is it like, I feel like I should write a book about the climate crisis, or do the dragons come first, or do the verses come first?
It used to be I would get a couple of sentences or a title as the sort of seed for a book, and that kind of lasted all the way up to, I don't know, really just before No Matter What. And then there was almost, I don't know why it shifted, but what the seed for each book would be a picture. It would just be one image would come. So, for instance, for Dragon Loves Penguin, that came because my editor was paying an unusual visit up to Scotland to see me, and she said, have you had any ideas about your next book? And I was like, no, oh God. And of course, as the days ticked down to her visit, I became more panic-stricken, and just before she arrived, the day before, I drew this. I don't know if you can see the dragon over, it's quite hard.
It's a little bit blurred, but it'll be good in the actual recording.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a dragon. She's flying over the ice. The ice is all breaking up. And there's a whole bunch of... well done. Whole bunch of penguins on the ice. And that was all I got. I got that picture, and I thought... I had been reading a load of books about Antarctica at the time, and I thought, what's that picture about? And I basically wrote a book based on that picture. This is what this picture is about. And it turns out I had no idea, but it's really a book partly about adoption.
It is.
And I had no intention of I'm going to write an issues book about adoption. However, I have written, I don't know, have you come across A Cat Called Waverly? Is that on your list, this book,
No,
Cat
not
Called
yet.
Waverly. That is, I did deliberately set out to write a book about war because there was a man who lived in Edinburgh who was a veteran of, I think, the Kosovo conflict, and he was homeless, and he lived in the streets in Edinburgh for many years until he died of completely avoidable septicemia. And over the years, I'd been sort of stopping to talk to him when I was in Edinburgh and give him some money and try and just sort of, well, there was nothing I thought I could do. I mean, at one point I said, you know, I was sort of saying to my partner, could we just adopt him? Could he come and live with us? Because I couldn't bear the fact that this really beautiful man was stranded in the streets of Edinburgh having to beg for money. And when he died, I was just about, I'd actually gone into Edinburgh that day because I'd written a book for him, because I'd come up with this idea of, if I write a book about, his name was Darren, if I write a book about Darren's story, about how he was a soldier, but also write a book about a sort of stray cat at the same time and weave the two stories together, and the cat is homeless and the man is homeless and he goes off to war and he got blah blah blah. And I was going into Edinburgh to say to him, well, basically to ask for his blessing before I showed the book to a publisher, and I was going to sort of share the royalties with him, because I thought, here's a way of helping him, of validating his story, of also sort of saying to children, here's what happens when people go to war. This is the human cost. And the day I went in to do that, I was walking up the steps at Waverley Station to where his pitch for begging was, and there were flowers tied to the sort of railings between the pavement and the road, and I thought, oh, I knew immediately that was, the flowers were for him, that he had died. So to a certain extent, that book is pure issue and nothing else. It sets out its stall very, very rapidly to say war is a horrific thing and here's what it does to people. But it was also about homelessness. And I think that's the only book that I've really done for years and years that has a very, very clear message. But I think because of the subject matter, because it's such a, you know, war and homelessness are just such, they're things that we should be so ashamed of as human beings. These are things we're not getting right at all. It's a complete breakdown of all of the best in humanity, that we cannot solve squabbles over territory without killing each other, and we can't look after our poorest citizens and keep them warm and safe. Could do it during the pandemic, but we don't appear to do it anymore. So I think that book was born out of just absolute frustration at why on earth can't we do this better? So yes, it is a teaching book in a way. But what I wanted with it more than anything wasn't to teach, it was to start a conversation with children whereby, because they've got such a clear sense of justice and what's right and what's wrong, and sometimes it's just really refreshing to be with small people who don't see things in shades of grey and see everything in black and white, because there are some things that are like with the war, everybody is talking in shades of grey, but at the bottom line, killing each other is not a good thing. You know, that's a bad thing. And the same with homelessness. It's there isn't really a grey shade to that. It's just wrong.
No, this complexity is really harming.
Yeah. So yes, most of my books are thankfully issue free, but not that one, I think. And you know, ironically, Olga, when I wrote it, I thought, actually, this is going to become almost like an academic exercise for children, because they'll say, what is war about? There won't be a war. And lo and behold. So I wish it were not so.
Yes. Have we got time for another question?
Go on.
It's
It's me, I'm awful. I keep talking.
You're wonderful. It's Children's Mental Health Week in the UK, and this Dragon Loves Penguin. That's the book for me.
Oh,
My son loves it, but I think we read different things in it, which is an indicator of a great book. It's different things for everyone, because I was that dragon whose egg didn't hatch a couple of times, and that was a lot for me to read, and really important and really healing. But this, for Children's Mental Health Week, I will read this quote, and maybe you could comment. All the other eggs were given endless gifts, fast toys, vast toys, flashing, clattering things that made a noise, but the little one was given love and time, the greatest gifts of all.
I can never read it. Sorry, but I can never read that line in a classroom to children without crying my eyes out. It's so embarrassing.
I barely coped now, yes.
Yeah, well done. It's just like, yes, it's the greatest gift we can give, not just our children, but each other, is time, our love and time. Everything else is absolutely worthless, to be perfectly honest. It's and so many children are fobbed off with, amazing, wonderful gifts and distractions, when in actual fact, all they really just want is to be with you. Why would they not? The first 9 months of a child's life, they could not be closer. And the rest of their lives is, we sort of push them away. It's just because, the practicalities of being an adult and earning a living and running a household means that it is very, very hard to have a small child clinging to your side all of the time, or just, with you constantly. So, yeah.
Also, it's like we've been sold that it's also a good thing for them as well, on top of that.
Yes, to be pushed
Socialization, independence.
Yeah.
You're doing them a disservice if you're holding them back.
You may as well start early, you may as well start young. These messages are everywhere.
It's like, follow your heart as a parent. It's like that first separation when they, go to a babysitter, or they shudder, go to nursery, or, what. It's there's an absolute visceral rage when your child is taken away from you, when they're small.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's almost like as adults we are being taught to ignore our deepest instincts, and that's all wrong. It's turning us into sort of.
Can we read you our mission statement and see what you think of it? Maybe to finish that.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
Have you got it, Olga?
Because that's why we've called ourselves the caring instinct.
Yeah.
Because so much of what we're told culturally tries to beat that caring instinct down, rather than give us an invitation to follow it.
And so as we were setting up, we thought, I've got it now. Yeah, we were thinking of, we thought, okay, let's create a mission statement together. So we kind of, we came up with this. We'll see what you think. The best parenting book is Your and Your Child's Heart. Look at your emotions, understand your needs, protect your relationship. So simple, but so hard in the world that's consumed with behaviour, measuring up and fitting in. We hold space for you as you find this focus and things start to fall into place, as you learn the power of your own caring instinct.
Lovely. Yeah. Yeah. It should be on hoardings in every city centre, so that when parents are driving home from work, they're reminded of what, it's like, trust ourselves. Yeah. Why have we stopped trusting ourselves? And that
Debbie.
bond.
Should we finish there?
You're your own therapy and you're our therapy, and you're a gift, and your books are a gift, and we're so looking forward to come what may.
Me too. Yes. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you for
so
coming.
very much. It's an honor. Thank you.